From the studios of the Optimism Institute, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Burke, and in every Blue Sky episode, we'll be speaking to leaders, researchers, and thinkers whose stories and insights will remind us that there is always blue sky above. Sometimes you just have to get your head above the clouds to see it. In the United States, as well as countries around the globe, there are few issues more vexing and divisive than immigration. As desperate people attempt to move across national borders, for whatever reasons led them to do this, it's hard to reach consensus on the best ways to manage our borders and either accept and welcome or reject and turn away these men, women, and children. But regardless of where one comes down on these matters, we're all left with the challenge of what to do with and how to care for people who find themselves here, now, as newcomers to our country. My guest today is someone who has decided to practice this very care after making a radical mid-career change from practicing corporate law to practicing compassion with refugees and asylum seekers in New York City. Ilze Thielmann is the director of Team TLC, an all-volunteer organization that has been greeting and assisting asylum seekers arriving in New York City for almost 5 years. Since starting out with just 10 volunteers, Team TLC now has more than 1,400 names on its active volunteer roster and a similar number of individual donors. And to date, they've successfully assisted more than 60,000 asylum seekers as they've arrived and settled into New York City. Ilze grew up on Long Island, herself the daughter of refugees from Latvia. She graduated from Princeton University and got a law degree from Columbia. She went on to a successful 23-year career as a corporate litigator before retiring in 2017. While considering what she might want to do next, Ilze was disturbed by images and stories of immigrants coming to America only to be detained and in many cases separated from their families. Looking for ways to help, a Google search led her to an organization called Team TLC, and the rest, as they say, is history. In this Blue Sky conversation, you'll learn more about the great work she and her colleagues are doing and the thoughtful and holistic approach they take to welcoming new Americans to this country. Her work is hardly without challenges, but Ilze's drive and positive, optimistic spirit are making a difference in the lives of many. I hope you enjoy this Blue Sky conversation with Ilze Thielmann as much as I did. Ilze Thielmann, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast.
Thank you so much, Bill. Happy to be here.
We are going to talk mostly about the work you're currently doing at Team TLC, but I'd like to talk a little bit about your background because it's not necessarily what people would expect for someone doing the work that you're doing now. You were a professional lawyer, a corporate lawyer. Is that accurate?
Yes, I was a corporate litigator for many years, 24 years. And none of the work I ever did had anything to do with the stuff I'm doing today. So I'm completely unqualified to do what I'm doing today.
And you just got to the point in your legal career where you're just like, enough of this and I'm going to try something else? Or what was the decision making there?
Yeah, not really. I mean, what happened was that it became very difficult to do the work that I was doing and still support my family of origin the way I needed to. There was a lot of crises in the years leading up to my retirement. And I spent a lot of time helping them and working with them and dealing with all the different health problems. And there were unfortunately, a number of deaths in my family,
yes.
And I said I needed to take a leave of absence. And thank goodness my partners at Watley Callis were very, very understanding and kind about it. And then ultimately that leave of absence led to my retirement.
So what we're going to talk more about today is the work you're currently doing at Team TLC. Can you explain what you all do and then how you came to be so attracted to this type of work?
Yeah, so thank you. We started in 2019. I was not running it at the time, and we were just greeting people at the bus stations, primarily the Port Authority bus station here in New York, people who were on their way from detention at the border to their sponsors. These are asylum seekers. And it was just kind of a way of helping people along the way. They had a place to go. They had people who were going to take care of them. And we were just helping them on their long journey from Texas or other places of detention to meet up with their family member or the organization that was going to help them or the friends who were going to help them. We started seeing more and more, not just a higher volume of migrants coming through New York, but also a higher degree of need in each individual that we came across. And it became clear that we really needed to be doing more than just, providing snacks and toiletries and assistance along the way. And we found ourselves, at the forefront of the migrant crisis when we started getting busloads and busloads and busloads of asylum seekers from Texas last summer. And it just kind of evolved from there because we had to adjust. We had to do something to help these folks, and no one else seemed to be stepping up, including the city. And we wound up being kind of the first point of contact in New York and the first people who helped these folks out in any way we could.
So to understand the history, so in 2019, if someone's coming to New York from the southern border, that's their chosen destination. Right. They've got family or some reason to make their way to New York.
That's right. That's correct. Or they're going through New York to another destination.
Okay. But then, as you described, the ones coming from Texas, that they were sent to New York. Is that
right.
Accurate?
That's correct. Yes. The first bus that arrived on August 5th of 2022 was loaded with people who did not even know. Some of them didn't even know they were coming to New York. There are people who had family in Texas and wanted to be in Texas who were shipped to New York. And we had to turn around and buy bus tickets for them to send them back to their families in Texas. So it was an atrocity, not to overstate it. It was a terrible, terrible thing to have occurred to these people. They were basically just being kind of evicted from Texas and sent to a place that was politically resilient, sort of made a lot of political sense for the governor of Texas to make a statement about sanctuary cities. Right. And there was no concern over whether these people should be going to New York or wanted to go to New York or even knew that they were going to New York.
And it was here in Martha's Vineyard or wherever the other ones. I mean, it's just.
Martha's
targeted.
Vineyard was a very strange situation. That was the governor of Florida who decided that he was going to get in on the circus and went and grabbed people from Texas and shipped them up to Martha's Vineyard. So that was a whole other crazy, crazy thing. But in the beginning, it was the governor of Texas sending busloads of people who may or may not have even known, let alone wanted, to go to New York.
So I've seen video footage of some of your work super early in the morning. The bus pulls in Port Authority and you're there. What happens? What state of mind are these folks in? And then what are you and your colleagues doing as they step off the bus to make them feel welcome?
Yeah, so we would greet people who were exhausted, afraid, confused, disoriented, traumatized. I mean, a lot of these people had been through so much trauma before crossing the border, let alone then finding, the greeting in Texas to be less than friendly. So these people were in bad shape. Some of them were in physical bad shape. The first bus that we greeted had a 12-year-old girl who had diabetes, who had not had insulin for 4 days, and we rushed her to the hospital. But all of them were in some state of distress. I mean, they were, as I said, they had all been traumatized. They didn't know what was going to happen next. They didn't know if they were going to be thrown back into detention. They were hungry. They were tired. They were, some of them, dehydrated. And so the first thing we did was to try to make it clear that we were there to help. And so we had signs saying, "Welcome, asylum seekers," in Spanish. We had big smiles on our face. That was something that I always emphasize with my volunteers, which sounds so trivial when we're talking about people who are literally, in some cases, in life and death situations. But it mattered. It mattered that we were the ones who gave them a true welcome, as opposed to just dealing with them as a problem to be contended with. So I insisted that everyone be very friendly, be very warm, sometimes even give a hug if it looked like someone needed a hug. And a lot of times that was a very welcome thing to these folks. You could see that they were very happy to have some sort of kind physical contact. And we would bring them into the Port Authority bus terminal, sit them down, make sure nobody needed any medical attention. If so, we did have medical services on hand through New York City. Ultimately, we would give them water, we would give them food, we would, and then we would sit down and talk with them and find out what they needed, where they needed to be, whether New York was not their final destination, not their preferred final destination, and if so, we would buy them tickets to go to where they needed to be and wanted to be.
You mentioned working with the city, so you all are an independent nonprofit group of volunteers. I believe you're all volunteer, but you're side by side with city officials and police and immigration people. How does that all work? Because I imagine it's kind of a mess of bureaucracy and who's in charge of what. And
it was. It absolutely was. It was a terrible time. But funnily enough, the first time we greeted a bus, that very first bus, we got kicked out of Port Authority. We got the Port Authority police came up to us and said, "You can't be standing here feeding 54 migrants and blocking traffic." And we were kicked out onto the sidewalk. And then we were told that the sidewalk was also not a good place for us. So we had to cross the street. We were literally in the shadow of the New York Times building, processing these folks and trying to help them out. We had reached out. I had been notified, just to back up before the first bus, I had been notified by a confidential source in Texas that this first bus was coming. I have worked with volunteers across the country for several years doing this work, as I described earlier, and through those connections, this kind of an insider who is helping with the busing, but has a heart of gold, reached out to that network and said, "Who's in New York that I can reach out to and get to help with this?" So I got a confidential call telling me we are sending a bus to New York on the 5th. It's going to arrive on the 5th. And I said, "Can I please tell the city?" And this person said, "Tell the city a bus is coming, but don't tell them that it's being sent by the governor of New York. Of Texas, because that will cause problems for me. I'm not supposed to be sharing this information with you."
And the governor of Texas wanted New York to be flat-footed.
Exactly. The governor of Texas wanted to catch us unawares. And thank goodness this person knew that the people who were going to suffer most were these unfortunate migrants who had been shipped to New York against their will. So she reached out to me and I reached out to the city and said, there's a bus of migrants arriving on Friday. There's going to be 54 people on there. They're getting there at 6 a.m. Help us. Like, we are just a little tiny group. We have like 10 active volunteers. We don't have the resources to help 54 migrants. We usually meet one family, a couple of people at a time. And now we're dealing with a large busload of people who are going to be in probably some pretty bad shape. And essentially the city said, "Good luck with that." We asked, can we get food vouchers? Can we get Metro cards? Can we get any kind of help to help these folks? And they said, "Well, maybe we can get you a volunteer." And they sent one volunteer from their volunteer corps. Wow. So there we were, 9 women at the Port Authority that Friday morning, 6 a.m., not knowing when and where the bus was going to come in. Thank God I had connected with an incredible activist named Adama Ba, who had been doing this work independently. She's not part of an organization. She's just a very, very amazing woman, a former asylum seeker herself. And she reached out to some of the organizations she had been working with, again, just NGOs, no one in the government, and got one group called Rethink Food to provide 54 hot meals, and another group called South Bronx Mutual Aid to provide the advocacy to help these people get into the shelters, because there was nothing set up to help these folks, navigate the difficulty of getting into the city shelters. And another group called Rap for Bronx provided the transportation, paid for Ubers to get these people to the shelters. So these groups all worked together, and there were nine women there. And I'm waiting for word on where which the Port Authority bus terminal is a huge bus terminal. I don't know if you've ever had the pleasure, but it's a large and rather unpleasant place. And
yes, at 6 a.m.
Yeah, and so we finally got word that it was going to be at gate 14 or whatever. We ran down to gate 14, and the only other people who were there were the members of a camera crew from Fox News who had been tipped off by the governor of Texas, because the whole idea was to have a different reason. Stunt, right? The whole idea was to embarrass New York City. So there they were, the Fox News broadcasters there with the cameras and microphones in these poor migrants' faces. And we're kind of blocking their way because we know that this does not behoove these folks to be interviewed on live TV about their asylum cases with no counsel and no briefing on, on how to handle this. And it was actually kind of amusing because when I later saw the broadcast, the reporter from Fox News was describing us as some group of ladies from some little volunteer group, and they're being really aggressive and getting us out of the way and protecting these migrants. But they have certainly taken charge of the situation. And, I never thought I would be happy to hear anything from Fox News. But that was, I was happy to hear that they thought we had been assertive and taken charge of the situation.
It's incredible.
And so, of course, it was broadcast live, and the mayor and the mayor's office of immigrant affairs saw that and were rightfully embarrassed, and of course made a beeline down to the Port Authority bus terminal as soon as that got out. But by that time we had already started processing these folks. We had fed them, we had given them clothing and toiletries, and we had gotten a bunch of them onto buses or into Ubers up to the shelters. So we had taken care of it. And of course, the next time a bus arrived 2 days later, the mayor himself was there. He was not going to be caught flat-footed again.
As she moved on from practicing law, Ilze Thielmann understood that she'd enjoyed many privileges in her life and saw that helping new Americans acclimate to this country and feel welcome here could be a perfect way for her to give back. In 2019, she began welcoming refugees as they got off the bus at the New York City Port Authority. As she imagined what they might be feeling as they stepped into this intimidating new world, she knew that little things mattered, like being sure to greet everyone with a smile. And while this work is full of frustrations, and you'll hear Ilze express plenty of disappointment in and disagreement with many elected officials, Ilze keeps her focus on the people she's serving, seeing the human beings in need, and not letting the controversies in politics get in the way of her mission. At this point, our conversation had taken us to August of 2022. And getting back to our conversation, I wanted Ilze to talk about what came next in her work. When and how did you come up with the idea for Little Shop of Kindness, which I'd like to talk about next? Because so now these folks are here, you've greeted them, you've gotten them hopefully placed or helped get them placed. Can you talk about the Little Shop of Kindness?
Right. So when we first started greeting people at the Port Authority, we knew these people needed clothing, right? A lot of them had just the clothing on their backs. So we would literally, I would bring a cart and people would bring carloads, and we would all show up with just bags and bags and bags of clothing to give to these people who had just gotten off the bus. And we had no storage at the Port Authority. It was not set up for us to do this at all. No. So we would then bring all, what was left over back home, and the next morning at 5:30 in the morning, we'd bring it back to the Port Authority and distribute clothing again. And at some point along the way, one of our incredible volunteers and allies named an amazing woman who is a legend in New York City politics named Ruth Messenger, was really, rallying for us to get some storage space where we could actually store stuff there and distribute clothing out of the Port Authority. And she had to reach out to the governor of New York, to put some pressure on the Port Authority, which is a New York, New Jersey entity. And, it's a combined state, New York, New Jersey entity. So she was able to put a little pressure on the Port Authority and get us some space. And so we basically opened we didn't call it the Little Shop of Kindness, but it was the first sort of distribution center for clothing was set up at the Port Authority out of necessity. And we had this old, abandoned store, and the asylum seekers were not allowed to go into that space. So we had to bring the clothes out to the asylum seekers. And when the buses slowed down and eventually stopped, when President Biden implemented Title 42 to exclude a lot of migrants, people were coming back to the Port Authority. They had now arrived, they had been processed, they had been sent to the shelters, but they were not getting clothing, toiletries. They were not getting adequate food. So they just kept coming back to the Port Authority because that was the one place where they had been greeted with kindness and generosity.
Right.
And they would say, could I have some food? I need clothes. And so we've started just, again, so much of this just kind of happened out of necessity and just reacting to the situation.
Right.
We set up a system whereby they would come in, they would have a seat. We would interview them. We would take a clothing order I created these order forms. We would get sizes and the number of, people in the family, and we would take them back into our crazy storage room, and we would try to fill those orders as best we could with what was on hand. And we served a lot of people. We served about 100 people a day doing that. It was no easy task. It was certainly not ideal for anyone, for us or for the asylum seekers. And I had a dream of having a place where they could go in and could pick clothing off the shelves themselves and try on clothing and be in a more civilized environment where they could actually be shopping, not being handed, take what you can, what we give you. So when we were asked to leave the Port Authority bus terminal in February of 2023, February this year, it was a shock, and it was scary because we didn't know where we would go, but it was also a great opportunity to now do it the way we dreamed of doing it. And that's what we did. We opened a little shop of kindness.
So you set up shop. So someone walks in, and I've been there, and there's clothing, there's toys, there's books, there's all kinds of stuff, and it's free. How does it all work?
Yes, we take donations. We take monetary donations and purchase to fill in the blanks of what we don't get in-kind donations, used clothing and whatnot. And we had, through the incredible generosity of the Greater New York Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, we were able to use this beautiful space right on Bryant Park.
Yeah.
And in the Seventh-day Adventist Center. And we set up this, what I thought was a quite beautiful shop. And it looked like a real store. Yeah. And stocked the shelves and put up displays and, hung lights and had fresh flowers every day and had a little fitting room for people to try things on. And we gave away whatever they needed. We tried to provide for them, including clothing, toiletries, toys for the children, as you said, books for the children. Even sometimes we would have donations of costume jewelry, and so ladies could have a little something to make them feel pretty again. Yep. And shoes and boots and sneakers and socks and underwear. And it was really lovely. We were really proud of the fact that we were able to provide necessities without seeming like these folks were a charity case or a problem, that they were valued customers more than a problem to solve.
And in the time since this all started, what is the inflow of immigrants and asylum seekers to New York like now? Like, what is the numbers? Are they up? Are they down? Is it steady? How does that work?
Yeah, it's, it depends on who you ask. There's a real debate over what the volume is. The city, if you ask the mayor's office, it has not slowed down at all. The people are flooding in. But there are folks on the ground who question some of those numbers. And there is a sense that there might be an effort on the part of the mayor's office to amplify, to maybe exaggerate the problem because they're so desperate to get federal dollars. So, our numbers don't match their numbers. They're saying that there are, thousands of people arriving every day. And we're just not seeing that.
Are you still going out in the dark in the morning and greeting buses, or is that?
Yeah, so that is something that continues to this day. Team TLC does send volunteers to do that. I am not personally doing that. I think I would be dead if I were still trying to do that. But I have these two incredible partners. I already mentioned Adam Abba and Power Malo, who runs Artists, Athletes, Activists. We were shoulder to shoulder for months at the Port Authority and greeting buses every single day together. And they continue to do that work when they are able to find out that the buses are coming. That's the other problem, is now that our pipeline of information has shut down. And the former sort of restrictions on when the buses could arrive have been lifted. So in the past, the busing companies who were doing this work for the governor insisted on there being some humane parameters put in place, such that people would not be dropped off on the street. People would not be dropped off in the middle of the night. So they had to be dropped off either before 10 p.m. or after 6 a.m.
Okay.
And there had to be, kind of structures in place to make sure these folks were not wandering the streets in the middle of the night. So that was how we were able to, every day show up at 5:30 in the morning and know that we were going to be greeting the first buses, because they were not allowed to arrive prior to 6 a.m. All of that is gone, has disappeared now. Okay. The governor has doubled down on his cruel political stunt, and now he refuses to even allow those kind of parameters to be put in place. So when we are able to get information about buses arriving, sometimes it happens at 2 o'clock in the morning. Luckily, the volume of buses arriving at the Port Authority is inarguably down. So it's 1 or 2 buses every few days, as opposed to 10 buses in a single day, which is what we were doing at the peak last year. And Optimism and Power and their organizations have taken over the role of greeting the people. But unfortunately, there's not very much that can be done at Port Authority. So we, Team TLC, continues to run our distribution of supplies, clothing, and other services at other locations around the city, while Power and Optimism greet people and direct them and help them get to the intake centers. But there are no structures in place. They're not even allowed to enter the Port Authority at this point. So it's a very brief encounter. They try to welcome them as best they can, welcome the migrants as best they can, give them whatever information they can about where they can get help, and then get them to where they need to be processed into the shelter system in New York. So it's a completely different operation, and very limited.
With the pace of the news cycles, you lose track. So I didn't realize that these folks were still being sent here from Texas.
Yes.
So it's basically, it wasn't a one-time sort of get publicity stunt, if you will. This is a policy now.
Yeah, I mean, it is a policy now, and I think it's a policy that has less to do with publicity than it does with just moving people out of Texas.
Right.
They really are overwhelmed, and I have no sympathy for the way this governor has handled this crisis. He has burdened the most burdened people. He has burdened the most vulnerable people with this. He's hurt those people the most by pulling his stunt. But by the same token, I do understand that when people come to Texas from other countries, they're not coming because they want to be in Texas. They want to come to the United States. Right. So it is a national issue. It's the national government should be handling it, not any local, state, or city government entities. However, given that we are all human beings and that we're dealing with human beings, to handle it in a way that increases the suffering rather than trying to mitigate the suffering of these folks is inexcusable, no matter how much of a burden is on the governor, or in this case here in New York, on the mayor of the city of New York, to turn your backs on people who are in their most vulnerable and most needful moment of their lives. It's just inexcusable.
In typical can-do optimist fashion, Ilze Thielmann saw a problem: refugees arriving in New York with inadequate food and clothing, and decided to pursue a solution. In doing so, she emphasized 2 important things. The first was organization. This would be complicated work, and careful planning and execution would be key. And the second was compassion. The people they served were in a vulnerable state, and acts of kindness and treating people with dignity would go a long way towards achieving success. Taking straight donations of clothing as well as cash, Ilze and her team set up a beautiful store that was warm and welcoming, and treated everyone who came in not as a problem to be solved, but as a valued customer. Getting back to our conversation, I wanted Ilze to describe how she chose to pursue this particular work after leaving her legal career behind. There are a lot of different things you could be doing with your time. There are a lot of other pro-social nonprofit activities you could be working on, but you focus on this particular issue. Why do you think that is?
I could do a lot of self-analysis. The easy answer that a lot of people kind of seize upon is that my mother was an immigrant. My mother was a refugee from Latvia after World War II. My stepfather was as well. I sympathize and empathize and identify with my family members who went through this. But I don't think that's the full answer. I mean, there are plenty of people who are immigrants themselves who have not chosen it, and there are plenty of people who have chosen to do this work who do not have immigrants in their family.
Right.
I just think that I have always felt very blessed in my life. I was given many gifts from birth that my own sisters were not given. I had two disabled sisters, both of whom had something called Williams syndrome, which is akin to Down syndrome and causes mental disability and physical disabilities. And on the other hand, I was born with natural talents and intelligence that I never took for granted and never took as a sign of my being more deserving. More so, it was more that I was very, very fortunate, and that I owed something back that I have always tried to pay back. So when I had the opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, when I no longer had to work for a living, my husband actually sold part of his business, and so during my leave of absence, he said, if you don't want to go back to work as a lawyer, you can do something else. We can afford that now. It was a great blessing, and also I think a great responsibility. So at that time, it was 2019, as I mentioned, and it was right at the moment when the Trump administration implemented its family separation policy at the border, which, I think I was certainly not alone in being completely outraged by that, but I was in an unusual situation of being able to dedicate my time to trying to help these folks in any way I could. So but I looked for whatever opportunity there was, and I happened to find this new upstart. I think it was like 2 weeks old, Team TLC.
Oh, is that right?
And said, yeah, let me join these. Let me see what we can do to help folks. At least we can't do anything at the border. We can help maybe people who are getting away from the border and getting to assistance. So that was how I got involved in this particular type of work. And it just, as I mentioned, it kind of ballooned. It was just a small, kind gesture that we were doing. And as the need grew, our response of necessity also grew. And it has now taken over, I was a volunteer. I did it a few times a week, and now it has taken over my life. I work about 60 hours a week at this. And love and hate every minute of it. If I'm honest, and I'm just about as stressed out as I was as a lawyer. But in some ways, it's more rewarding. In many ways, it's more rewarding. So no paycheck, but other rewards. Yeah, certainly.
Well, and since I'm talking to you from the studios of the Optimism Institute, what have you seen in this work and in these people you're serving and that keeps you going, that keeps you hopeful, that keeps you optimistic that you can make a difference and that these folks can settle in and become Americans? And, can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I mean, I always say to my volunteers, we don't focus on what we can't do. We focus on what we can do, and we do it. It can be overwhelming to look at this problem, which, as I have said, it's not just a national problem. It's a global problem. I mean, the displacement of people all over the globe is not new, but it is an ever-increasing problem, and it's only going to get worse. So it can be overwhelming to look at that and say, what can little old me, what can I do? So we really do say, well, today we can get coats on the backs of 100 people who would not have coats. We can feed 150 people who would otherwise have empty bellies. We can help people. We can help a family get a stroller. You focus on these seemingly small things that we can do that actually do make a difference. Now, in addition, we provide legal services, which can obviously make a huge, huge difference. We have partners who come in and help get children enrolled in schools, and we have a partner that provides health insurance, free health insurance on our site. And we have a lot of other things that are arguably much bigger sort of contributions to these people's lives. But there's nothing like having a little kid come in bare feet and being able to shoe that child and give that child a snack and give that child a toy and send that child back into the world knowing that he's better off and that he has had a pleasant interaction with people. He has been treated with kindness and love, and that his parents have a little bit more hope. So I always talk about moving the needle forward just a little bit, like I'm not going to solve the world's problems, but if I am moving the needle forward and if our group is moving the needle forward just a little bit every day,
yes,
that's enough. Well, it's not enough. Right. But it's something, and it's something that can keep us going. Tomorrow we'll move it forward a little more. Tomorrow we'll put more coats on more backs and more shoes on feet, and we will help more people. And when I do get discouraged, which does happen, I am blessed to have an incredible group of volunteers. We have about 1,600 volunteers signed up, which is unbelievable to me.
Wow.
As, being that we had 10 about 18 months ago, we had about 10 volunteers, but we have a core group of volunteers, about 20 people, who are my leadership team. And every time one of us starts to flag, one of us starts to sag and get discouraged, someone else will say, come on, guys, we've been through much worse than this. We got to do it for the little kids. We got to do it. Yep. And we rally each other. And that really keeps me going. And another huge thing is the response that we have gotten from New Yorkers. Every day, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that every day, somebody shows up and says, I want to volunteer. I want to do a fundraiser. I want to donate money. How do I do a coat drive? How do I do a shoe drive? And there is so much love, kindness, generosity being poured out onto these migrants and onto our organization, our mission every day. That is really, talk about optimism. Yeah. It is. I have become a little bit cynical in past years. Sure. And because we've seen so much, just inhumanity. And this last year, as exhausting as has been, has redeemed that, has given me that again, given me back this faith that human beings are fundamentally good and that most people want to help other people, and they just don't know how, or they're overwhelmed, or they've got too much else going on. And you give them the opportunity, or even the hint that they could somehow help, they jump at it.
Yep. We
have had people pouring out energy, love, generosity every single day, and that is a huge inspiring factor. That is really what keeps us going every day.
Oh, I believe it. And you have that firsthand experience of seeing the young child get shoes and go out and happily greet their parents. And then what you don't see but hopefully feel are the ripple effects that go on after they've left. So they have a better day. The parents feel a little more welcome. The parents have a better day. They spread that to their friends. You don't even know the ripple effects. You have a sense, but you wouldn't know how much effect you're having out there.
I do. I hope that is true.
I'm sure it's
really,
true.
Yeah, I think that's true. And also within each individual that we help, it's like, okay, they walk a little taller and they have a little more confidence and they have a little more faith and hope. And that can be the difference between giving up and persevering. You never know where you are meeting someone, at what point they may be at the breaking point, and you just doing that one thing for them could make a huge difference. And that inspires us every day. This might be much more important to this person than we could even imagine.
Exactly.
Let's just always assume that these people really, really need us today, and let's do our best for them.
When asked why she pursues the work she does, the first thing Ilze mentions is that her mother was an immigrant, and this helps her have empathy with these latest waves of newcomers to America. But she also feels a great sense of personal good fortune and, frankly, luck, having grown up with two sisters with debilitating and life-shortening medical challenges. understanding and appreciating her own blessings has led her to help others who haven't been equally fortunate. And while debates swirl about who's responsible for what and which entities should pay for which services, Ilze and the group at Team TLC take a humanistic approach and keep their focus on the people in front of them, the vulnerable newcomers to New York City. To kick off our final segment, I asked Ilze if she ever considers the notion that she and her team will create the first impression that the people she serves will have of this country and the nature of the people here.
Yeah, that's why it has been very important to us to be that smiling, friendly, kind face when we first encounter them. That's why we were there every morning at 5:30 in the morning, because we knew how important it was to say, you are welcome. You are welcome here in New York. You're welcome in this country. This is a country of immigrants. We are all immigrants, and you are one of us.
Yep. And speaking of persevering, I had the opportunity to visit the Little Shop of Kindness, this beautiful store, when you were recovering from a minor flood, only to be about to experience a major flood. And so I know you are shopless right now, but you are close, hopefully, to getting. And I just wanted to mention that because you have incredible resilience and perseverance. You've had many opportunities to just pack this in, and a flooded store was an easy one too. But you're still at it.
Yeah, I've been encouraged by some people to back it in and say, you've done enough. You've done enough.
Yeah.
You've helped thousands and thousands of people. Isn't that enough? And well, first of all, nothing we could ever do could ever be enough. So that's just, but yeah, we've been up against it a few times. Team TLC, that is. And when the first flood happened, we said, okay, we're going to clean it up. And we cleaned it up. And the second flood happened and we cleaned that one up. And the third one happened, and that was it. We were done. But we right away, I mean, I went to the shop right after the flood, and I did sit down and cry. I sat down. Our beautiful shop had been essentially destroyed. It was raining as hard inside the store as it was outside. This is during the huge torrential downpour that we had in late September of this year here in New York. And I cried, and I did feel hopeless for a few minutes. And then I said, wait a minute, there's lots of clothes in here. There are clothes in here that have not been damaged. And I just started kind of almost frantically just pulling clothes, like, grabbing clothes. Is this dry? Okay, this is going on the pile. Okay, is this correct? And I reached out to my partners and I said, who can use clothes? Who will do a distribution of clothing? We have clothes here that are dry. We have to get out of this space because mold is going to start, so how do I put these clothes on people's backs? And it happened that Adama, whom I now mentioned 3 times, was doing a clothing distribution the next day at her space up in Harlem, which is, she started an organization called Africana. So one of my volunteers came to the shop, Ivan Helfand. He and I just took everything we could. We piled it up into the front of the store. We called a moving van. And we said, bring this up to Harlem to our partner. And the next day, 143 people received clothing. And when we saw that we were able to do that, literally while there's still standing water in the shop, we said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to find a new space. But in the meantime, we are going to put as many coats on as many backs and as many shoes on as many feet as we possibly can by working with our partners. And we started putting the word out and saying, who can host pop-ups? So we now have a weekly pop-up at Africana in Harlem. We have a weekly pop-up in Brooklyn at a place called Repair the World, which is one of my favorite names of an organization ever. Yes. And we have a monthly pop-up at a temple here on the Upper West Side called Congregation Road of Shalom. And we are doing spot pop-ups in different places. So we have continued. We have put coats on backs. This is the expression we use. We have put coats on the backs of about 1,000 people.
Wow. Since
the shop was closed in October. So, the mission continues. Our legal work continues through the incredible efforts of Tracy Kitzman, who I dumped that task onto several months ago. She's been doing an incredible job running our legal team. They do legal triage tables where they basically assist people in understanding what their rights and responsibilities are under the immigration law, do change of address applications, and basically just kind of do the like, as I said, triage, like just to stop them from falling through the cracks in this moment, not necessarily getting them asylum, but helping them, not do a foot fault and wind up subject to deportation. And we have now started doing pro se legal clinics to assist people in getting their own asylum applications on file. Pro se means basically do it yourself.
Yep.
And so we hold these clinics. I say we, it's Tracy and the legal team holds these clinics where they walk asylum seekers and now TPS applications. TPS is temporary protected status, which is a whole other thing. So we now have these clinics where we assist asylum seekers and people applying for temporary protected status to fill out their own forms and get them on file so that, again, just to kind of get them past that next hurdle and avoid their sort of defaulting into a very dangerous situation of being subject to a deportation order. So that work has continued through Tracy's incredible perseverance and hard work. And we will continue to do all of this work as long as we need to in different locations. And we are praying and hoping and are cautiously optimistic that we will soon have our own new space with a new little shop of kindness where all of these services and all of these supplies will be provided in a beautiful, dignified environment where they will feel like they have come into a place where they are valued and not just a problem to be solved.
Which you richly deserve. So I hope that works out, and I look forward to learning more about it. Now, if people are listening to this conversation and are as amazed by your work as I am, how might they help? How can they learn more about Team TLC website? What's the best way for them to learn more and maybe reach out and help?
Oh, great. Thank you so much for this opportunity. So our website is TLCNYC.org. We had Team TLC, but we lost it. So we are TTLCNYC.org. Everything you really need to know about how to help is there. We have there's a button for volunteering, and you can kind of see what the different volunteer opportunities are around the city. And actually, we're going to be doing things remotely as well. You can assist with the legal clinics, even if you are not a lawyer, a paralegal, or otherwise well-versed in any of that. We just need people to kind of help shuffle papers, and we need translators in many different languages, so you can assist with that as well. And you can donate. There's another button that tells you how you can donate. You can donate money. You can donate gently used clean clothing. Once we're back in the shop, you can also donate toys, which is always a fun thing for people to give out at the shop. And you can also buy things off of our registries. We have registries at Amazon.com and Target.com, where we have our most needed items that we just don't get enough of through the in-kind donations, where you can ship directly to us off the registry as if it were, a shower, a baby shower or something, and we will receive that and immediately distribute it to the asylum seekers.
That is brilliant. I didn't know that part myself. That's amazing. So followers of the Optimism Institute, people listening to this podcast know this is one of my favorite anecdotes, where Fred Rogers said when he was a kid, Mr. Rogers, that when he saw scary, tough things on TV, his mother always said, look for the helpers. And immigration and asylum seekers is a tough, scary thing. And you and your organization are those helpers. And I'm so glad to be able to share your story with our audience. Keep up the amazing work. And thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Thank you so much, Bill. It was a great pleasure.
Take care. I always find it helpful to hear entrepreneurs reflect on some of their lowest moments, since press reports and profiles so often focus solely on successful outcomes. Ilze doesn't hesitate to say that she broke down crying when she saw her beautiful store flooded, but it didn't take her long to get back to work, salvage what she and her team could, and move on to come up with new ways to help the populations they serve. Today, as Team TLC works to settle in soon at a new permanent home on New York's Upper East Side, they've opened smaller pop-up locations. And yes, they're called Little Pops of Kindness, continuing to persevere in their important purposeful and high-impact work. They've also expanded their services from greeting, feeding, and clothing newcomers to New York to providing legal and other professional services. Despite the many curveballs thrown their way, Ilze Thielmann and Team TLC optimistically forge ahead in inspiring fashion. I hope you enjoyed this Blue Sky conversation with Ilze Thielmann. Before you go, we'd appreciate it if you'd leave us a rating or review, and also consider subscribing to Blue Sky so you don't miss any future episodes. And while you're at it, if you don't already, please follow the Optimism Institute on social media for more uplifting content and updates about this show. Until next time, I'm the founder of the Optimism Institute and host of Blue Sky, Bill Burke, and I thank you for listening.